Hey Simon, how are you?
Very good. How are you? I'm excited about anything with geek in it.
Really? Okay, well, we're gonna have a great conversation then, because I got a geeky question that
Let's
I'd
go.
like to ask you.
Let's go.
But I'm gonna start off first though,
Okay.
talking about this show, Sugar. It's fantastic.
Thank
I'm
you.
pleasantly surprised by it. What motivated you to want to get behind this series?
I loved the script. It's super simple. Mark Protosevich, who's I've been a fan of for a long time, and as a geek yourself, you'll know he's worked on some things that we both like.
Mhm.
The script was so both classic and throwback and love letter to movies that I are critical to my life and film
Mhm.
noir and Chinatown and LA Confidential, but also modern and fresh and just kind of a wild radical swing at the
Mhm.
same time. I loved that combination or collision of something old fashioned and something super modern.
Yeah, I love the use of classic Hollywood films.
Mm,
They almost feel as a device to understand the world, and
mm,
for Sugar to kind of look through the lens of how to understand that
totally.
in the situations. And movies obviously are playing a huge part in the series in the way they're sort of interstitially cut in scenes and get fragments of it, like almost like memories.
Mm.
Um, you've already mentioned a few in your list there, but what classic Hollywood films still stick with you and maybe have in some ways changed your perspective of life?
Oh man, so many. I mean, in general, classic Hollywood films range from Wizard of Oz to
Hmm.
Sunset Boulevard
Oh yeah.
to Casablanca to His Girl Friday. I mean, there's just so many classic Hollywood films I watch, and I chose those ones because those are the ones that I watch over and over and over again. And I think that what you said is exactly right, which is that movies and classic cinema are a lens through which Sugar sees the world, but
Hmm.
I think it's a lens through which we all see the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the way that it informs his identity and his character, it informs all of our identities, our characters. I feel like I learned how to be a man more from Tom Cruise growing up than I did my dad.
I love it.
As a fellow geek, you'll know Empire Strikes Back was the first
Mhm.
time I was like, wait, my dad is can be complex and human and flawed.
Yeah.
Not as flawed as obviously Darth Vader, but nevertheless, I do think movies are our way into who we are.
Yeah. And, you've mentioned you've worked on some pretty geeky projects in the past, the
Yes, I have.
X-Men franchise being huge. Star Wars Rebels is easily my most favorite Star Wars piece of content that we've gotten
Oh
in
man,
years. Yeah.
man,
So,
that's awesome.
uh,
Thank you.
and, going from those, big IP properties,
Mhm.
how does your approach differ with a television series like this? And are there any unique storytelling opportunities that excite you about the TV format? I know you've worked in TV before, but especially with maybe more of a serialized and more structured list of episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I've always tried to balance working with IP with working on original things at the same time, or things like The Martian that was not is
Hmm.
based on a book, but it's not a big piece of IP with decades of, fandom. What I like about original stuff is that you are unencumbered, both by the actual thing that it's based on, but more by an audience's or fans' expectations. And
Hmm.
so you are in many ways constantly allowed to and encouraged to surprise people.
Hmm.
And I think so that's exciting to me. And television is fairly new to me. Like, I mean, I spent the first probably 20 years of my career working primarily to entirely in features. And I still work in
Hmm.
features, obviously, but what's cool about TV as a storyteller is you just get to stretch out character. To me, it's about character. It's that you get to go deeper. It's a more vertical storytelling, even though it's horizontal, even though it's going longer. You just get to go deeper dives into you living with a character for 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, right? And it's
Hmm.
something I will say that the only training I had for it was the X-Men franchise because it was, and obviously comic books do this. Comic books are serialized,
Hmm.
and we knew within reason that we were going to make an X-Men movie, once every 2, 3 years. And I can't even remember, five of them. And when you add all that up, it's like a 10-hour season of television. And
Yes.
you're following the same characters and you're trying to evolve those characters. And so that the serialized format of telling sequelized movies was a good training ground for me. Obviously, a high stakes training ground, but but it was exciting. And when I thought about, wow, I could have told all 5 of those movies in the span of, 6 months of a writer's room and a year and a half of shooting, that's compelling.
Yeah. I love the comparison of taking like a huge franchise like the X-Men franchise and comparing it to how you have to distill it down and
Mm.
focusing on the characters. And actually with that, here comes my geeky question.
Okay.
There's a big push obviously in the MCU. Who has X-Men rights? As a geek, what would you like to see in the next
Hmm.
iteration of the X-Men?
That's an interesting question. I'm going to give you a very simple answer, something new.
Awesome.
It's like I'm really proud of what we did. I'm really
Mhm.
enamored of what Bryan Singer did with the first couple movies before I got involved.
Right.
And Ian and Patrick did an amazing job. James and Michael did an amazing job. Obviously, Hugh was extraordinary as Wolverine, and I think if not Hugh, it's going to be hard for someone to take that over. But I'm excited about just a new interpretation of the comics, and I think there's so much room to explore and to grow. And I know that Kevin Feige will do that because Kevin, I think, I don't know if he can say this. I don't even know if it's entirely true anymore, but I think the X-Men are his favorite comic. And
He said it, yeah.
yeah, and I certainly know that he's wildly passionate about it. And so and I know how talented he is as a storyteller and as a producer, but I have 1,000% trust it's going to be incredibly dope.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
for me, it's just something new.
Something new, something fresh. I think everyone's kind of on that boat. I know a lot of people have, cling to that nostalgia of the Singer movies and the movies that you worked on with the First Class series, and they
Yeah.
definitely helped shape the comic book film genre and establish some things. I totally agree. I think fresh and maybe more character focused approach would
Yeah, I
be
would love
really,
that.
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that would be a lot of fun. Now, speaking of characters, what do you look for in a character? What drives you to want to write or work on a character and just be like, I'm motivated to get behind this, especially in the landscape of television?
I mean, it's different things all the time, but I would say probably what it boils down to is a character who is both relatable, so I can understand and be inside his or her shoes, but also something I wish I could be. So it's a combination of relatability and wish fulfillment. And I think that when you can combine those two things, where you're like, I wish I was as strong, I wish I had superpowers, and yet also I can identify with that person because they're fragile and vulnerable and insecure and flawed and all of the things that we all are. That combination for me has always been what drew me to characters when I was a kid. And and what continues to drive me as a writer and a producer, storyteller.
Well, again, with Sugar, there's so much to take in with his character.
Mm.
This is first entry into a story. I think that we could safely say I want to explore more of the character. What are you hoping viewers and audiences will
Yeah.
take away from this first entry?
My hope is that audiences take away the love of classic film noir, that may be a reintroduction or a new introduction for people, and the modernity and the freshness and the sort of radical, innovative approach to storytelling and to specifically the detective genre. Detective stories are everywhere. There's how
Mhm.
many hundreds of television shows have we seen, cops, detectives, mystery shows. And so like finding a way to put top spin on that genre is what I hope audiences take away, is that this is cool because I love mysteries. I love, somebody solving puzzles. But oh, I really love this character and I've never seen anybody quite like him. And I want to follow him into more adventures and more stories in the future.
Well said, because that's exactly what the show did for me, at least. It really established this character of Sugar, and I want to explore more. And it really does flip, as you said, the film noir crime detective genre on its head, especially even the way it's shot. There's some classical moments, but then there's some more like docu style stuff. Felt very fresh. Simon, thank you so much for taking the time for
Thank
joining
you.
us on the Geekcentric
That was really
podcast.
fun.
You are absolutely fantastic, and you know a good story when it's in front of you. And thank
Wow.
you for all the work that you've done. I
Thanks,
appreciate
brother. I
it.
really appreciate it. Thank you so
All right,
much. Good
have a
talking to
good
you.
day, man.